Shalom. I'm Rabbi Nathan Davidovich, speaking to you from Efrat, Israel, on behalf of the webyeshiva.org. I'm going to spend just a few minutes talking about one aspect that we learned from this week's Torah portion, Parsha Vayechi. Vayechi, of course, starts with the leading to the death of Jacob. It says how Jacob lived in the land of Mitzrayim, land of Egypt, 17 years, and he blesses the children. And then he dies. The whole parsha ends with the death of Yosef. This parsha really is the beginning of the exile into Egypt. And the question that is asked by many, first of all, is why were the Jews exiled to Egypt in the first place? This was not a sudden thing. It was not due to any sins of the Jewish people. In fact, it was ordained. You recall at the beginning of the Torah, the first part of the book of Bereshit, Avraham Avinu is told by God, "Your people will be servants in a land not theirs." So what happened? What's the reason for this? More important than that, or equally important than that, is a question that bothers many of us to this day. We see things happening to us. We see things happening to good people. And we have to ask, why? Why do seemingly bad things happen to good people? There was actually a book close to that name, but it's something we struggle with. So what does this parsha tell us? This parsha, first of all, points out from the Davidovich Shalom, in his commentary, he points out that God created the world with the idea in mind and the plan in mind for the Jewish people to have 4 different exiles. As the Torah says, it says, "V'horetz hoitza sohu v'vohu v'choshech al pnei sohom." The land, before anything was created, was nothingness, was darkness on the face of the depths. And the sages take those words, and they say those words refer to the 4 different exiles of the Jewish people. And the tohu, word tohu is the Babylonian exile. Galus, the word, the other exile is the Persian exile, and then the Greek exile, and then the current one where we still haven't had Mashiach. So the Torah tells us about this from the beginning. So obviously this was God's plan to begin with. And the same thing with the exile into Egypt that I mentioned, that was told to Abraham. 400 years. Why? Why did the Jewish people have to go to Egypt for 400 years? Who were the sons of Jacob who came into Egypt, who were exiled there ultimately? They were all, as the Torah says, tzaddikim. They were all righteous people. Yet they were there for 400 years. The desert, after we received the Torah, we're wandering in the desert for 40 years. The sages tell us that generation of the desert, where there was no generation just like that. They were so holy, so knowledgeable on such a high level. Of course, the question that's always asked, nobody can answer, is the Shoah. We lost 1/3 of our people. Why do all these things happen? Why did all these things happen? And are they based on any sins that we're doing? And the Torah comes to tell us, and the Davidovich Shalom explains it in depth, that this is all part of the plan of God, which we don't understand to begin with, but it's not based on anything that we specifically have done to cause it to be. And he says the way to get through this is with emunah, with total faith and belief that everything that happens to us happens because it's the will of God. As he says, Yesh Yehudi behirot ha'emunah bezeh, hari yichol lamod b'chol hakashiyot ha'ovrim olav. If a Jew has perfect faith and belief in God and accepts things, understanding that this is the will of God, even though I don't understand it, then he'll be able to get through all of the difficulties in life. When Jacob was about to go into Egypt, he was concerned, and God came to him and said, don't worry, you have nothing to fear. I will go down to Egypt with you, and I will make you a great nation. Well, there's two things we learn from that. When he said a great nation, Goy Gadol, it really means not in material things, but really in spiritual things. He will bring the Jewish people to a higher spiritual level. And of course, it was the having to go through these difficulties, having to meet the tribulations of Egypt that enabled the Jewish people to reach a level where they were able to receive the Torah. Similarly, when we go through difficulties in life, if we overcome those difficulties and we continue to go on and still can maintain our faith in God, we understand that this is part of God's cheshbon, and God is not throwing us away, is not casting us away. When God said to Yaakov, I will go down to Egypt with you, he's saying, and as the Zohar HaKadosh says, the Holy Zohar says that wherever, he says, wherever the Jew is in trouble, at any part of his life, God will be with us. Whether it's on a national level or on a personal level, God is there with us. God is suffering with us. And in fact, an appropriate prayer sometimes is not to take me away from my suffering, but God, you don't belong here in this suffering. We ask you to do something so that you're not exposed and you don't have to go through this suffering. Like on Tisha B'Av, we ask that God, who's lost the Beis HaMikdash, the Holy Temple, that he no longer be homeless. We ask for his homelessness to stop. Not for us that we want it, but for God. Same thing. But the Emunah, the Rambam, on the question of Emunah, he says the very first commandment of the Torah, Anochi, Hashem Elokecha asher tzayseichem me'eretz Mitzrayim, I am the Lord your God who brought you out of Mitzrayim. He says that is the mitzvah of Emunah, the mitzvah of Emunah, of total trust and belief in God. And he said, without this Emunah, we can't get through any difficulty in life. With the Emunah, you can. It is our Emunah, our trust in God, that has kept us around this long, that will continue to keep us around, not only as a nation, as a peoplehood, but as individuals. And as we see, we're getting closer and closer to the time. The psalmist says we were like hayinu kacholmi, we were like dreamers. We had a dreamer in the last couple of parshos. Joseph was a dreamer. Who would have thought that when his brothers cast him into the pit full of scorpions, snakes, sold him into slavery, that he would end up being the king of Egypt and being able to be the person who would provide for all of Egypt. Who would have thought that would have turned around? Things happen that we don't understand, but it was his emunah, his trust in God, that enabled him to get through those difficulties. So too, our trust in God will enable us to come closer and closer to that wonderful day of Mashiach, when God will once again reveal himself and be the king of the entire world, and everybody will understand that the whole world is filled with God's kindness. So I can't stress enough, emunah in God, belief in God will help us through every difficulty that we have in our life. Thank you for listening on behalf of the webyeshiva.org. I wish everybody a wonderful Shabbat, a Shabbat full of the greatest light of Hashem. Shabbat Shalom.